Hello and welcome to Say Yes to You and Why You Don't. I am Claudia Braun, mindset and lifestyle coach for women who are great at saying yes to others, but not necessarily as great at taking care of themselves and saying yes to themselves. So today we are part of the 6-week series, the Wellness series, and we are working on those Accomplice saboteurs that I mentioned in our last episode. And we're going to go into two of them. There's 9 of them, but I'm going to give you a window into 2 of them that perhaps might be causing you a little bit of stress, struggle in your own life with your relationship with yourself, your relationship with others, and possibly even your work life. So before we dive deep, I want to make sure that you gain access to the session that I offered last time. It's going to really assist you in what we're talking about today, because today we're going to go into the 2 different accomplices of this sabotage judgment of the mind that gets in our way. We're only going to go into 2 of them, and there's 9 of them. And here's the thing about judgment and these different accomplices. We all have them. The question is to what degree. But if you want to find out what degree is impacting your own life, download the assessment, access the assessment. I'm going to put a link where you can take the 5-minute assessment and then let me walk you through it, because there's really good stuff and you can really get clarity on what's going on and how to have a different experience in your own life so you can create more peace of mind that you absolutely deserve. Okay, so I want to start with pleaser, the pleaser saboteur that you might be really familiar with, and part of what has you saying yes to others. So it may not be that surprising to you that there is somewhere inside of you, maybe she is the front and center way you run your life, but somewhere this pleaser is really negatively impacting your life. Because here's the thing, our sabotage patterns are there because they serve us. So you're getting something from it, it's benefiting you in your life. But it's the negative impact we really want to focus on, because that's where the problem is. And so the more you have clarity on what's going on, and the more it's impacting you, and the level at which it's impacting you, the more you can start to shift and turn things around. So it may be obvious to you that you say yes to others and not to yourself, hence this podcast. But the downside of saying yes to others, maybe you're making others really happy by your availability, but it also has the impact on you of less time for yourself. When you keep saying yes to all these other people, less time for you. And perhaps it's kicking up some resentment within you that you're always the one who's saying yes, and you look around and notice not that many people are saying yes for you or as willing to step up. And perhaps you go into your mind and say, nobody's as good as I am. Nobody's as kind as I am. Nobody's as self giving as I am. And as a result, you start to feel a little bit more self-righteous because you know what's right. You're doing the right thing. You're the one saying yes, and you have judgment on all these other people who are not doing as you are doing. So noticing that gives you some clarity on how judgment shows up for you. Because here's the thing, when we're operating in these sabotage patterns, even though maybe you feel like you're a better person because of it, and you're better than these other people who don't, better than sets you up to feel one up, better than somebody else, as if they're less than you. When we are in judgment of any kind, it robs us of our happiness. And I know, as somebody who in my past has been a pleaser extraordinaire, how easy it is to judge somebody else for what they don't give or how they're not as giving as me. But staying in that place only created more resentment and only created that feeling of superiority, self-righteousness. So this is an opportunity to just get honest with yourself. Does that happen for you? That in your saying yes to all these situations, all these people who ask you, do you start to feel a little bit better than, a little bit superior, a little bit as if you know, and those poor people that don't? And then are you noticing that that is creating one-way relationships for you? I'm looking down because I have some notes and I want to make sure that I do not miss them. Do you find it creates some one-way relationships where you're doing all the work and you end up with friends or surround yourself by people who don't offer to help you? You get into relationships where you're doing all the work. Have you noticed that? And how does that make you feel? So the ability to look at this with clarity and to take the blinders off and the judgment off of yourself for having these patterns is that you get to see what's actually really going on. And then you get to see, does it really serve me in the end? Am I having the kind of relationships that I want? Am I feeling as good as I want to about myself? Am I wearing myself out? Am I getting sick because I'm always the one who's overgiving, not sleeping that great, not taking care of yourself, making all these sacrifices for other people? But when it comes to yourself, you don't give yourself the same considerations. And again, there's no judgment on it, but it's the opportunity to look at how it's impacting your life by overgiving, by saying yes. And then because that's so much how you operate in your life, you just say yes to these relationships that don't feel fulfilling. And then feel resentment or even blame because they're not showing up in kind. It always helps to see our part and to see how we're contributing to these situations and circumstances, because otherwise we get into a whole other saboteur where we end up feeling like we don't have any control over things. And this is really an opportunity to see where you're creating these experiences, and you get to see where you can start to take your power back. Awareness is the beginning to change, which is what we talked about in the very first episode of this podcast. There's power in knowing what's going on, what you're doing. Awareness is only the first step, so it doesn't change it. but you can't change until you have the awareness and the clarity. And sometimes it's hard to look at it because we think, oh, must mean there's something wrong with me, or I've done something wrong. And then that just fuels the judgment, self-judgment, which we talked about last time. So this is really an opportunity to extend grace to yourself and look at it with just fresh eyes and say, I didn't realize that that's the cost to myself. These one-way relationships, these relationships where I don't get fulfillment. I give, and then I don't ask for anything back. And if I do, I don't get it. Sets up a lot of resentment. So know that the power is in being able to acknowledge what's really going on. And in acknowledging what's really going on, you get to start to do something different. So I'd really invite you to look at what you are noticing is the cost to yourself for this constantly pleasing others and not pleasing yourself. And how much could your life benefit by starting to please yourself and not be so willing to always be pleasing others? And sometimes people make the kind of black or white thinking where they say, well, I want to be a good person, right? Or I don't want to be selfish. Okay. It's not as if you're either a pleaser or you're selfish. It's not one way or the other. You can be kind and generous and giving to others and also be kind and generous and giving to yourself. It's not an either or. And it's that either or thinking that creates there was a bug on my face. He wants to be here too. It's the either or thinking that creates the problems. So it's a willingness to have a wider viewpoint on this and really see where you can be kind and loving and generous and also take care of yourself. And it doesn't mean that you have to have these walls of separation either. Again, it's so easy to get into this black or white thinking. And I do remember that when I was first starting in this way, I would just say no to everything because I had said yes to everything for so long. I was trying to do something different, and trying to do something different, I just said no to everything. That's one way. It's not necessarily the best way because there is some discernment. There isn't a black and white rule. I never do this or I never do that. You will discover in this practice, and I would encourage you to make it a practice, a process of discovery, because you're not going to know until you try it. And that's the thing that I notice is that it's scary when you start making different choices. It's scary to put yourself out in the world in a different way. When you've been that person who has felt, maybe you start to feel like you're a doormat because you just say yes to everybody. You don't give yourself any permission. And so when you start to say no, or I don't want to do that, or that doesn't work for me, there's an internal feeling of, no, I shouldn't say that. They're going to be mad at me. Here's the thing. They might be mad at you. That's how they've known you all your life. When all your life you've been that way, they may be mad at you. That's okay. That's part of the process too, is discovering that those people who really love you, they might initially be put out or not that excited about your new choices because maybe it will mean less for them. But And those people that really care about you and love you, they also see you not doing so great. Maybe they see you suffering and they don't want you to suffer, because those people that really love us do not want us to suffer. They want us to take care of ourselves. They may not like it, but eventually they will get used to it. But it starts with being willing to do something different. And it is about, as I have frequently say to my clients, it's about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And sometimes when we're putting on new behavior and when it's been that way for so long, that's what we have to do, is practice being uncomfortable and getting comfortable being uncomfortable. So as you're listening to me, what is that thing that's coming up about you being a pleaser, and how is it getting in your way? And what's one thing that you could take away to start to do something different? And do take the assessment, because it will help you and it'll help you get more clarity. So I mentioned that we're going to go through two different, call them accomplice saboteurs. Why is it an accomplice? Because the master way we sabotage ourselves is through our judgment of others, judgment of ourselves, judgment of our circumstances. All the judge is the master way that we sabotage ourselves. But then there are these accomplice saboteurs that also really get in our way, and they stop us from being who we're here and meant to be. And they cause us to feel unhappy, and they cause us to not feel truly present and enjoy for our life. And it really helps to understand so that we can start to make changes. Know that understanding is not necessarily, I'm going to rewind that. Understanding is not the way that we change, but it is the beginning. Understanding stops us from being unconscious and just doing things out of habit. Awareness, getting clarity, puts things into a different framework, and we start to get, oh, I'm doing it again. May not have the solution to do it differently, but you get the understanding that what you're doing is not in your highest good. And that's how change begins. So they say that change actually is 20% insight, 80% practice. We need the insight, but it is not the thing that makes our life turn around. And I'll tell you that I've shared this before. I've been in this path for many, many years, over 3 decades. And that is true for me in spades. In the beginning, I got information about who I was and what I was doing and how I was giving myself away in relationships and how I was making other people more important than me. And I would give my power away, and what they wanted was what I would do. What they wanted is what I did. That's how I was groomed to be, and that's how I was in relationships, romantically or friends. And then eventually I started to get kind of sick of it. And eventually I made a decision to do my life differently. But that was a practice. 80% practice, 20% insight. I picked up a lot of tools that I am sharing with you. So listening to me, important. Gaining the access to what you're doing, clarity, important and essential to turning things around, because unless you start to realize that what you're doing isn't working and what it is that you have set up, you're not going to take the steps to do things differently. But just having the awareness, just listening, being in a passive role is not going to change your life. it's interesting, but then you go on to things being exactly the way they say, this exactly the same, or the way they have always been, which I've said here before. Einstein's definition of insanity: doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, without the practice, with insight. Basically, that's what you can expect. And again, that's really what I love about the assessment, because if you do the assessment and you let me walk you through it, I'm going to teach you a tool and you'll be able to start to shift things, and you have a stronger way of creating different patterns. So I mentioned that there were going to be two different accomplice saboteurs. We talked about the pleaser. The second one is the hyperachiever. And the hyperachiever is that aspect of you that tends to be a bit more perfectionistic. And as a result of that perfectionistic way, stress is constant, constantly stressed, constantly in the place of wanting things to be perfect. And not only that, yourself, who you are as a person, is based on your accomplishments and what you've achieved in the world. And that is conditional. And that means you're constantly in that position of chasing the next achievement and never feel any sense of peace, and not able to really enjoy the experience or the journey, because you're always on to the next thing. Could be the way your children are, can be the way that your house is, can be the way that your business is, can be the next sale, can be the next whatever. And it's that pressure experience that you put on yourself that is based on accomplishments or external validation. You don't feel it inside. You feel it based on what somebody else or what the world sees as achievement or accomplishment. And as a result, it's very difficult to admit that you're not perfect, because perfection is everything. You're not perfect. What's the point? And you hold these very high standards and expectations for yourself to be perfect. And again, this is something that I absolutely identify with. I really struggled to admit if I had made a mistake, and I would cover up if I made a mistake because I didn't want to not be perceived as somebody who was perfect. And then inside, my self-esteem was always based on that external validation and external achievements, and wanting other people to acknowledge me, and always feeling like I couldn't relax. So much stress. And then creates that feeling that you can't really be vulnerable. You can't admit to anybody. You can't admit to anybody because you haven't admitted to yourself. And it creates this internal feeling of kind of a fraud, because we're not meant to be perfect. We're human. We all make mistakes. We're perfectly imperfect. We're perfect in our imperfections. But the hyperachiever, that way of being, when that is front and center, it doesn't allow for us to relax. It really has us looking and being in that place of feeling like it's got to be perfect. We've got to be perfect. Got to get it right. And it creates very stressful relationships. And it keeps other people feeling like they have to kind of walk on eggshells around you. And there isn't that ability to just be okay with what is. And it can waste a lot of time when we're in that place of having a stressful overreaction to seeming setbacks. It can just feel like there isn't room for that because there was so much invested in that going a certain way. So when it doesn't go that way, it feels even more impactful and painful. And it's like strike against you. So that is the negative impact of the hyperachiever. And know that the difference between achieving and hyperachiever is that there's nothing wrong with achieving or want to achieve, but it's in that place of having an ability to be in the process of it, to be willing to enjoy the experience. It's not all contingent on the next, on the next, on the next. And then relationships being a casualty because they inconvenience you because it's all about the achievement and the getting of it. So there's just a high cost to your relationship. And really, at the core of relationships is your relationship with yourself. The biggest cost is yourself. And then everybody else who is a casualty in that experience. So know that every one of these accomplices, these accomplice saboteurs, they served us for a reason. They helped us survive. But the problem is when they get in the way. And if these are running us to any extent where you're not allowed to be at peace, you're not allowed to take care of yourself, you're feeling the negative consequences of this, you hear me and you're like, oh my gosh, this is going on for me. Know that it's no longer serving you. It perhaps did, and aspects of it are, especially there can be strong kudos, right? Pleasing other people can make people very happy about having you in their life. You do everything for them. But when inside you're feeling resentful, you're feeling exhausted, you're feeling stressed, you're not taking care of yourself, that's a high cost. That's a high price to pay. And this hyperachiever, when it's running you, don't get to be vulnerable, don't get to have other people be in harmony with you as you are allowing yourself to be vulnerable in situations. And achievement isn't everything. You allow yourself to be in the process of it and to actually enjoy it, not feel burnt out by the constant chasing of the next thing. So that you can have the achiever, you can be a pleaser and kind and loving, but not have it have the negative consequences to this detriment of you. And that's what this is about, is being able to reclaim the you that you truly are. And so as you're listening to this, I hope that you have found this to be valuable, and I would love to hear your response to what's come up for you. How does your pleaser show up? What does it look like? What does the achiever, hyperachiever look like for you? How is that impacting you? What is a takeaway from today? And to access how the other saboteurs are running you, the other 7, do access the link that are posted in the show notes on how you can take the 5-minute assessment and then let me walk you through how this is impacting your life and allow me to offer you some ways in which you can start to turn this around. So thank you so much for being here. I am Claudia Braun, mindset and lifestyle coach for women who are great at saying yes to others, but not necessarily as great at saying yes to themselves yet. So we are in the midst of this 6-week wellness series. And over the next 2 weeks, we're really going to be looking at the ways in which you can bring more peace, more calm into your life, and really start to bring a little bit more harmony. All right. I look forward to being with you again next week, and I will say bye for now.